Welcome to Transforming the Toddler Years, a Core 4 parenting podcast blending soul and science-based strategies to empower pandemic moms like you, raising kindergarten-ready kids. I'm Cara Tyrrell, your host, a lifetime lover of littles, girl mom, early childhood educator, and conscious parenting coach who truly believes that how we connect and collaborate with our kids in the first 5 years is how we raise world-ready kids who will change this world.
Today's episode is a request from our private Facebook group. One of our members wanted me to bring someone on to talk about how to handle yourself as a co-parent during a separation and an eventual divorce. And what an amazing topic to recommend. So I have someone today for you that is going to blow you away. Her name's Erica Bennett, and this conversation about such an intense topic is actually so grounded because she's into mindfulness and she is a coach in that space. And she used all of that work to help her navigate co-parenting and really blend that woo with the work that had to be done to keep their child in a healthy space as the divorce came to be. So I know we're just going to get so much from this conversation. She's also the creator of the Crazy Ex-Wives podcast. So if you enjoy this, be sure to go listen to her over there, where she really honestly educates and supports people to do their best for themselves and their kids during this time of change. Erica, thank you so much for being here with us today to tackle such an important topic. We know that there are more parents dealing with co-parenting, separation, divorce than ever before, and helping our kids do this in a really healthy way is a powerful skill that takes practice and intention. Oh, we're so glad to have you here. Can you share with us how you got to the place you are at right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I am super excited to talk about this topic because it's so crucial to being able to move forward, to be able to create a safe space for your kids to move through divorce, to redefine what the family structure looks like, because, 50+% of people are divorced. It no longer is. I grew up with there was a white picket fence in my front yard. So I had the stereotypical, right? Family of 5, there was a dog, there were cats outside, there was a white picket fence. My dad worked, my mom stayed home. That's not today's story of what a family looks like. But the need to still have our kids feel loved, to have our kids grow up safely is still the core intent and job of parenting. So my story, I got divorced. I got separated in 2015 and divorced in 2017. So I had a really long separation because I really wanted to save the marriage. So what the long and short of it is that I was frozen myself. I was stuck and saw no other way forward other than repairing what was very, very broken. And it obviously took time to get broken. And so I held on as long as I could until, through growth, through healing, through learning about myself, I realized that was not the place that was the best fit for any of us anymore. And that moving forward in defining a new path was actually going to be the best way to start creating or co-creating with my now ex-husband.
Wow, there is so much in there. And what I hear when you talk is your whole journey. I hear the ambiguity and the uncertainty from the beginning. And then I hear this confident, clear woman who has a picture, who created a picture of what you wanted to see happen next. And that's so empowering. Honestly, if moms walk away from this episode with that small seed of empowerment, that is going to make it all worth it. But I know you have so much more goodness to share with us. So in navigating that, when you made the decision, you said, okay, there's a new plan. How worrisome was, how is he going to come on board with my new vision? Like, how many times did you have to get through that? Because I hear that all the time. People ask me that all the time. What if he is not on board with my new plan?
Yeah, the funny part is I still ask myself that some days. That question never goes away. It's not a thing that all of a sudden gets fixed and then you're free and clear, right? So it took some time to get there because being the controlling, overly controlling half of the relationship that I was at that point, I decided I knew the way forward. And in regards to the marriage, he had actually fully moved on at that point. So we both knew the marriage was over, but when we shifted into like, okay, I had a strong idea of what I felt co-parenting needed to look like. And I remember we were having a conversation the day we actually called it. We were having this conversation and I was like, I want to be the best co-parents we can be. I'm like, I want to kick ass at this. Like for our son, we have one son. His idea of family is so important to my son, like spending time with his cousins, seeing family. It is something that in his little world, right? He was 4, almost 5 at the time we got divorced. He didn't understand the legality of it. He didn't understand the paperwork that was filed. He just knew that, there's mom and mom's family, and there's dad and dad's family. And in his world, that was his whole family. And so when my ex and I sat there and I was like, I want to kick ass at this co-parenting thing. I want to show people that there's a way that you can do it together. I'm okay that chapter ended. That chapter was what it was supposed to be. We're ready to move on. We both want different things, but at the core of it, we share this little person and we both want the same thing for the little person. It did not go smoothly for us. So I'll just rip that Band-Aid off. If you guys are out there and you feel like you are constantly battling your co-parent for how they need to show up, this is your wake-up call that you don't get to control that. And that's a super hard pill to swallow. And it is a super hard lesson because as the mom, right, I just knew when my son was upset or what he needed or when he was hurting. And I knew how I wanted that male figure to show up in his life. And when his dad didn't, it created a battle between me and his dad. Right? You're not doing it right. You need to do it differently. You need to be better at this. And the reality is I have zero control over how he parents. Now, I will say if there is anything around emotional or physical abuse, if there are safety issues, I am not talking about that. I am talking about, that your child is safe at the other house, but maybe they're not listening to the child as much. Like a great example, my son would tell me things, but didn't feel safe telling his dad things. Just didn't feel comfortable, right? Like they didn't have emotional conversations. Now, I wanted his dad to show up in that space. It's not a space his dad felt comfortable showing up in. So one of the first big lessons to be able to move forward in co-parenting, you have to let go of trying to control their actions. You have to understand that the only thing you can control is you. And that while like the heart of mine was, I wanted him to show up a certain way because it would help our son. If he didn't want to, that is him changing the relationship with his son. And it's not mine to control. What is mine to control is I shifted my intention to how can I help my son navigate this? How can I help my son know that this has nothing to do with him and has everything to do with his dad and how his dad's hurting or how his dad's feeling and that he doesn't need to take it on. So you just can't control how they show up. And it is a really big first step to be able to let that piece go.
Yes, I can imagine how challenging that is and also how freeing the moment it finally happens. What I hear in you, though, and this is what makes your journey so remarkable, is that even in those moments where you wish things would go a different way in the other home, you had enough compassion and empathy for your son's experience to be able to let it go. And when that focus is there, right, in the center point, which is this human being that you created together, it sounds like it just adds enough perspective to be able to make a decision that you're not going to look back on later and wish you hadn't made.
Yeah. And you're going to make mistakes. You are. I remember I love therapy. So I just kind of pop in. I try different therapies. I check it out, like all the talk therapies, the body therapies, the movements, whatever it is. But there was one therapy session where I was sitting there talking to the therapist, and I was upset because I'm healing and I'm reacting sometimes in ways that I don't want to as a parent. And I have a little person who's hurting too, and he's reacting in certain ways. And we're kind of like, we're the fire on fire some nights between my son and I. And I was talking to the therapist and I was like, oh my God, am I like leaving long-term scars on this child? Right? Like I yelled because he spilled water, right? But I am so overwhelmed and grieving and hurting that it comes out as like, I can't do one more thing, right? And you yell. Okay, so that was kind of the situation of what I yelled at my son. I didn't mean to, and now he's crying and I'm upset. And the therapist said this, and I remind myself of this constantly. He said, you are never going to be perfect. You're never going to do everything right, but it is how you repair what has gone wrong that counts. And so if you make a mistake, own it. Go back. Like you showing up to that child and showing them like, hey, I'm sorry that I snapped. Didn't mean to. How can we fix this? Right? So owning that piece, owning the grieving process, right? Owning all the pieces in it, help you move through it. And to what you had said was, it was not easy, but there was a focal point for me. There was a little person. So every time I wanted to react to the ex-husband, every time I wanted to send, a digger of a text of just you, right? Every time I wanted to do something that was not the nicest, I had to ask myself, does that help the kid in the middle? Does that, one, show him how I expect him to treat other people? And two, does it help to make this new life any easier on him? And every time you go to take action, right? The question is, does this move you closer or farther away than what you really want? And if you want to create a world that is less stressful on your child, it means you don't get to send those texts to the ex. You don't get to like ratchet it in there and pick on things just because you're hurting. You have to go deal with your own hurt, but it is not about taking it back out on the other person, because it is the kid that gets stuck in the middle. They feel it every time they feel it. Even if they can't comprehend it, they know something's wrong.
Absolutely. They are sensory beings. They are emotional creatures, and they store all of that information. Even if they don't show us that they're absorbing it, it pops out later. You said something that I really want to pull back out on, because you said the word relationship. And here at Core 4 Parenting, especially people listening, they likely have some older kids too, but maybe they only have really little kids, toddlers, preschoolers, kindergartners. Building that core relationship with your child is so important. And you said that's when my ex-husband got to redefine and create the relationship on that side. One thing that I know about households, my household is not a divorced household. My kids come to me to share certain things, and they go to their dad to share certain things. It's just the way it is. And so for moms who struggle, because now when they're with you, they're just 100% with you, and they're with dad, they're 100% with dad. If they struggle because that's still true, how do they deal with that?
Tell me more. You mean like if the kids are on the dad's side, kids aren't having a good time, and then the kids are coming back?
So what's very likely is that if you're on the dad's side, but you're having an experience emotionally that you would go to mom, is that they're going to struggle more because she's not there to go to.
Yes.
Right? The meltdown might get bigger. The misinterpretation might get larger. It just could be a lot. As a co-parent, do you find that there's a FaceTime in when he needs to talk to you about something and he's not at your house? And is that something that you designed with your ex-husband as an okay thing to do?
Yeah. So I think every co-parenting is going to be a little bit different, but one thing that I really stood up for was access to either parent at either time. Because remember, this little kid, especially when they're little, or 4, 5, 6, 7, even, now he's 11, but if they are stuck somewhere and they don't have a rope to security, that shows up in emotional baggage or emotional trauma, right? And so from very little, it's so funny because I'm really anti-tech for kids, but from very little, my son had what was first just a little iPod because he could watch YouTube videos on it, right? So he had a certain amount of time that was okay. But then he could also iMessage and text, me. So there was no cell phone attached to it. It wasn't a thing, but it was like he could have it for certain times, or if he needed to text grandma, or if he needed to text me, so that he could create a bridge back to that sense of security that he needs. So that eventually evolved. Right now he got a cell phone last year and has his own number, and there's growth in that. There's emotional growth that needs to happen to get to there. But there are systems you can create. You can either, like we did, because we only had one kid, so I could control the tech access and what he was able to have. Other options are setting up consistent times when each parent checks in with the other kid on those days. So the days that the kids are with you, does dad call every day at 5:00? Or does dad call at 7:30 at bedtime to say goodnight? Or does he call after school, right? And now the days that they're with dad, are you doing the same? Creating this consistency of a schedule that the child knows they can depend on, even if that call is 30 seconds. Hey, bud, how are you today? How was school? Who did you play with at recess? And then they might be off and that's fine. But it is showing them that you're available and that you're consistently showing up for them. Now, the other thing I will say too is when that happens, so what would happen is, my son would go to his dad's, and he wouldn't feel seen the way that he feels at my house because, again, moms and dads parent different. When he would come home, all that would come out. All that would explode all over my house on a Sunday night, trying to get him into bedtime, right? We were fine. It always got triggered at bedtime. So if you're also struggling with a kid who once bedtime hits, all of a sudden it's meltdowns and it's tantrums and refuses to go to bed and refuses to stay in bed, it actually goes back to separation. They don't want to leave you again. And now you're asking them to leave, right? By just going to their bed. They're going to sleep, but that means that they can't be near you or next to you. And it can cause some explosions of everything that got bottled up from that weekend. So if that is the case, I had to just start to prep myself. I knew there was a chance we were going to have some rough times. So what did it mean? It meant that we moved a little slower. It meant that we started bedtime routines a little bit earlier. It meant that I put away my phone and all my attention was on my child. And that when he had those meltdowns, I didn't leave. I'm here with you. I'm not going to leave you. I know big feelings are scary. I know that you're hurting. Let's just sit with it, right? I actually used EFT tapping on my son, and I would actually tap on his temples because he's having a fit. And whether I could get to his temples or the sides of his knees, breathe with me. Okay, take a deep breath. Right? So I'm guiding him through trying to move those big emotions because big emotions are scary. I mean, think about it for yourself. Mm-hmm. Adults don't want to deal with their emotions. Why do you think kids do? And in kids, it takes over their whole body, right? They're feeling it. They can't put words to it, but they're feeling something is wrong. So to maintain your relationship, right? If we circle back, create some consistency and access. Make sure that the kids either have a set time when they know they can call the other parent, or if there's a way that there's an iPad or an old iPhone, right, that they can text at any time. And then just know that if those emotions aren't dealt with on the other side, you might be getting them on the way back. But that is not a reason to then call your ex and yell at him about what he did. And the only reason I can say that is because I used to. So my child would come back and I would call and I'd be like, what did you do? Why is he like this? What happened to him this weekend? Right? Like the blame And the anger and the hatred was directed back to the ex. And the reality is 3 people are hurting. So I can't change that. I'm hurting because now my son is having a meltdown and I don't know how to fix it. And I don't know what happened. And I would do anything to save him from this. But the only thing I can control is how I help him navigate through it. So going back to what can I control? How can I help this little person who is struggling? How can I be present and show up to the best of my abilities that I can right now?
Such big work. I tell people all the time, parenting is the biggest and most important job that you'll ever do in your life. And I'm learning from you today that consciously co-parenting is actually the biggest job that you will ever do in your life and has an even more massive impact because of all the different dynamics that are now present in the flow state of their life. I've just so many questions for you. It's wild. So what about the mom who is dealing with someone who continually disappoints their child? The promise is made, the promise is broken, it's made again, the no-show happens again. Aside from maintaining your own composure, which clearly is this mindset guru coach that you are showing us through your words and your tone here. And I can see it, by the way, everybody, I can see it on the screen, just exudes off of her. Hey, Cara here, just popping in to ask you a quick question. Are you dealing with meltdowns? Of course you are. You're a toddler mom. What if there was a tool that could help you manage your own emotions and triggers better, so you can help your child return to center faster inside the meltdown moment? I am so excited to share my free guide with you. I've even recorded audio files, 5 mindful mantras for conscious moms managing toddler meltdowns. Grab it today with the link in the show notes. Then download the audios and manage meltdowns consciously. And now I'll bring you back to the rest of the episode. How do you speak to your child in those moments so that you soothe instead of cause more drama?
Yeah. How do you take your own ego out of it? One of the commitments I made very early on is that because when we started, remember, I thought we were going to be like co-vacationing together and stuff, which it's not happening right now. But I made the commitment that I would not be talking badly about his dad, because at the end of the day, he loves his dad. Now, I can talk badly about his dad to my friends, to my support system, to my network. But I was very mindful that that was never in his world, because even if he doesn't have the same connection with his dad as he does with me, he loves his dad. And those relationships are super important. And the moment you decide to put your kid in the middle of a fight between you and your ex, you are asking them to show up and be an adult, and they can't, nor should they. And so even when you say it in a joking manner, even when you say it as like, oh, well, he did wrong, right? To try and side with your child. Oh, that was so wrong of him. He shouldn't have done that, right? You are hurting their relationship. And my thing was, I was never going to be held responsible for how my son and his dad related. His dad is always welcome here. His dad is always invited to attend. His dad is always included in any messages. The door is open because our house is loving. Our house is open. Our house embraces a blended extended family. I cannot control what happens on the other side. And so there's so many different ways I want to run with this conversation, but it's hard. It's hard to not want to talk negatively about the other parent. But what you do need to know is that if you start doing that, it also reflects badly on you. It also starts to impact the relationship you have with that child. Because gosh, if mom is talking like that about that person when they're not here, what is she saying when I'm not here? What is she saying when other people aren't here? Again, those core values of how you want your kid to treat other friends, you have to be able to mirror them. And it's really hard to take your ego out of it. It's really hard to not blame and try and side with the child. But even in a co-parenting situation, like you and the mom and the dad are on a parallel plane. Okay. Like think about you two are, when you're married, those two little figures, like the top of a wedding cake, are standing next to each other. And when you're divorced, those two figures are still on the top tier, but now they're separate. And all your kids are on the tiers below. And when you start to let that ego run and talk negatively about your ex and invite that child to step up to that top tier, to be your partner in this negative talking, it, one, puts far too much pressure on the child, but it also starts to blend the lines of what their role is. And they are no longer just a kid. They start to push back, right, on the authorities, on the boundaries, because now they're equal. Now, mom, child, and dad, they're equal. They're all on the top tier of that wedding cake. So even when that line's broken between the mom and the dad, you two have to stay on the top and the kids are underneath. How do you do that? How do you do that? Every time you feel the urge to say something, judging about the other person, first remind yourself that they're hurting too. Okay. You have no idea what's actually going on in their head or in their world. So they might be acting not out of the best. And two, what are the facts? Not the emotions, not the judgments, not the irritations, not the disappointments. What are the facts? And the facts are things that are black and white, that are true, that nobody can argue with, that those are the details that when a child is ready can be shared, right? So pull that ego out of it, catch yourself. So, 90% of the work is catching yourself so that you're not continuing to pollute the pool that your child is playing in. 10% is helping your kid work through it. And the 10% is big, and the 10% feels a lot more important than the 90%, but I'm telling you that you need to spend more time working on your own ego, your own grief, your own healing process. Now, in that 10%, your kid has now come home. They are super disappointed, or they didn't even get to go because dad no-showed again, right? Dad didn't call, dad didn't show up. There was supreme disappointment for something, a little child who is holding out hope so badly for somebody that they love. What can you do? You have to go through the same steps. You have to guide that child through the same steps of healing that you need to do yourself. Okay. So when any sort of healing opportunity comes up, the first thing you have to do is acknowledge it. This hurts. This sucks. This was a really big disappointment. I know you were looking forward to going to play with your dad today. And I know that it must hurt your heart so bad that he is not here. And that's okay. You get to be sad about it, right? Acknowledge it. The second thing is you've got to identify it. Now, your kid is probably not going to have the words for it. Hey, I don't know if you have covered this topic yet, but playing the game of helping a child identify the emotions they're feeling because they don't have the words, right? So now you need to help them identify, how does this make you feel? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling mad at dad? Are you feeling like it's your fault? Like, help to find the words, right? Because when you identify it, now you can heal it. Otherwise, it's almost like it stays hidden in the shadows of your mind. It hurts and it's there, but you don't know what it is. So acknowledge it, identify what it is, and then move into helping them process. This has nothing to do with you. This is all about what's happening in dad's world, and we don't know what's going on. So what can we do? What can you and I do to change this? Or what can you and I do to make today still be fun, right? Should we cuddle up and watch a movie together? Should we go to the park and go on the swings? You now co-create a new memory with that child so that it isn't all lost, right? They're not sitting in their feels. So if you can help them acknowledge it, identify it, and then process through it, kids are resilient. Once they got it, they move on, right? Like we've all seen it, right? They're like, I remember there's a video I have of my son as a toddler losing his mind because I turned the TV off, right? We had like our 1 hour of TV and the TV went off and he's like, more TV. And he's just going off. And I'm like, do you want to play? Will you play with me? Will you play with me? And all of a sudden it's just like one of the things I said to play with all of a sudden was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Right. And he's off and running and it was gone. So remember that your kids feel big in the moment. And if they can process through it, you have to help them though. But if they can process through it, it leaves just as quickly as it shows up. If it's not leaving, it's because they haven't really healed it yet. And that's okay too. You just keep revisiting it, but help them through it. So 90% of the work is you getting your ego out of the way. You do not get to hate on that ex in front of the child. And then the 10%, help the child understand, help them navigate the feelings and know this has nothing to do with them. Total side comment, but it has been something we still use today. And that was, I have talked to my child about hurt people. And so this comes up on the playground. This comes up in the classroom. This comes up when somebody does something that doesn't feel good. And so when something happens from another parent or from a kid that they're playing with and it hurts their feelings, we talk about, you know what, that person must be hurting pretty bad to hurt somebody else, because people don't hurt other people when they're happy. People don't bully other people when they're happy. People don't do things that make others sad when they're happy. They do it when they hurt so much that they want somebody else to feel as bad as they do. And so being able to use that little nugget, right? If that parent doesn't show up the way that kid wants, this has nothing to do with you, kiddo. You know, dad is hurting right now, or mom is hurting right now. And I know that he loves you, but he's struggling too. There were lots of times that I would try to help my son navigate that conversation with his dad. I would say it wasn't as successful as we had thought, so we stopped doing that. But, you know, hey, I can help you. Do you want to talk to your dad about this? Do you want to talk to your dad about how it made you feel? Do you want to write him a letter or draw him a picture, or should we call him on the phone? We can tell him and I can help you tell him. But again, no ego. No hate. You cannot throw hate. It is so hard, you guys, but it's one conversation at a time. You build this resilience that you can do the hard things and create a safe space for your child.
Wow. Oh, you're such a wealth of information, and the truth bombs that you're dropping. I mean, they're coming at me. I can feel them. So you've touched on this a couple of times. I really want to wrap up this conversation with this idea of who can you express to, because you do have to process what you're feeling. So this idea of chosen community, how do you choose them? Where are they? And then also something I get asked a lot is, okay, if I manage not to do this in front of or to or with my child, it's fine. I'll just go to social media and I'll plaster it out there and it'll make me feel better. So if you can talk to, where do you think this community is that people can go be part of, filter free, and get it all out when they need to, that doesn't long-term affect their child? Because they can go, like in 4 years, they're going to be able to see what you posted on social.
Yeah. And I think the same thing, the posting on social. I mean, there were so many times when I was like keyboard warrior, right? Typed it all up, thumbs are hurting, never posted. Because when I read back through it, it was my opinion and my hurt. Remember that whole, like, is it a fact? Is it a fact? And if it is not, all you're doing, just like the comment of like, hurt people, all you're doing is perpetuating the hurt. And while in the short term, it feels good to be able to vent, right? Because what happens if you vent something horrific, the rest of your little tribe shows up. Oh, what a jerk. Can't believe he did that. You're so right. You're a saint. You're this, right? And then the other half is like, oh, she's still got some work to do, right? So you can't drop it on social. They will find it, right? It is always found. It's no different. Even though you think that they're not there, it is no different than you saying it with them in the room. So how do you find your people? What I found, here's your next little nugget, is that people go through seasons. So I don't ever look in terms of things as like, this has to last forever. But what do I need right now in this season? So I actually had 3 influential women, key women that were different seasons of healing my divorce. right? And you'll find the same thing. So when you're looking at how do I create my own support system, what do you need right now? I knew that when I was navigating the separation, I needed somebody that no matter what I told them about the details of this separation, that they were going to stay true to helping me fight for my marriage, that they were going to let me vent, but say, okay, but Erica, what do you really want? Okay, how can we look at this with understanding? How can we look at this with grace? How can we move forward, right? Then there was somebody who was really about the self-exploration of my own healing process. And then there was the hey, I'm single again. Who's going out with me, right? The last phase is where's the party girls at? So how can you find your community? First, definitely check out therapy. Every therapist is not created the same. Just because they have a license, just because they have an office does not mean they are any good. Cannot tell you how many really absolutely terrible therapists I have been to before I have found a handful of ones who really supported me the way that I needed to be supported. And they lasted for a season. They lasted to hold me up emotionally while I processed through what needed to heal. And when that healing process was done, so was our time together. I kind of moved on to a different therapist, or I moved on to a different process, right? Eventually from therapy, when I moved and processed through most of the pieces that I needed to, the gym became my new therapy, right? Lifting weights became my new therapy. Getting outside hiking became my new therapy. Look for, the reality is there's not a ton of divorce support groups. So I'll just drop that. I'll just put that one out there. Every divorced person I talk to talks about the fact that they need more help and more support. So finding other divorced individuals to talk to, again, you're literally interviewing them for if they're the right fit for the job. If they just want to complain and moan about the ex, and they're probably not the right one to support you. If they are somebody who's okay, am I pissed at them? Did they screw up? Yes. Am I willing to let it go and move forward? Create some new healthy boundaries so I'm not mistreated again, but can I move forward? Then yes, they are the right person for you. The other thing is there are a handful of great books out there. I'm thinking right now because a lot of my books were more about saving the divorce. And at this point, we're already divorced. I did a parenting class that was led by a group of therapists in town. So it was required as part of getting divorced. So we went to this full day seminar where you learned about how your kids are processing it, right? They also offered therapy. They offered kids therapy. So being able to do a quick Google search and find, divorce resources, just every single time you're asking yourself, is this person going to support me to achieving my ultimate goal? Or is this person just want to complain about it? The other thing I'll say, if I can do a little shameless plug, it's the whole reason my podcast called The Crazy Ex-Wives Club is out there, because we didn't have support, right? So I spent a lot of years. I love self-help. I love self-development. So for me, while it was painful, that is my jam. I spent over 5 years diving deep into the healing process, into how do you navigate through a divorce? Because the reality is you probably haven't done it before. You don't know what you don't know. And so you don't know how to heal the places that got broken because they've never been broken on this level before. And so I created the podcast to be able to help women navigate through that, to know that they're not alone, to understand some of the other resources. So a lot of the great guest artists that I'll have on there, right, have amazing pages and channels to follow to give you more support kind of for individual topics around there. So
wow.
Find your people, find your tribe, but constantly ask yourself, will they support you in what you want to achieve, or do they just want to complain?
So much goodness. And yes, absolutely. Please, there's no shameless in it. Everybody go subscribe, right? Listen to the Crazy Ex-Wives podcast, and also go ahead and tell them what else you can offer for support, because when you're talking about finding the right person, for a lot of people, that could be you.
Yeah. So I left my corporate job for this because, I was in corporate America for 19 years. My job was sales and training and development. So my job was to find the behavior that created success, AKA made more money. And after my divorce, That's not what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about the mind and how trauma gets stuck in our mind. When we have an emotional trauma, a traumatic experience, how that little moment can actually start to control all of our actions moving forward, and what is the path to heal it. So now I offer programs and I offer private coaching to help women navigate through the healing that comes with divorce. So we look at understanding where you are. How do we heal the hurts? How do we heal those places that got broken? How do we help you? How do I support you to rebuild into who you want to be? It's a love-hate. I wouldn't wish divorce upon anybody, but it is also your rebirth. It is your opportunity to redefine who you want to be. I mean, I remember when I got divorced, like picking out dinner wasn't even a choice I made anymore. Right? Because the ex got home first. It was his job to make dinner because I worked later. And so like all of a sudden somebody's like, but what do you want to eat? And I was like, I don't know. Right. So it opened I vowed when I got divorced, I vowed to retry everything I had ever sworn off as something I didn't like, and to see if I didn't like it or if I was just too afraid to try it. Because I was in a do-over. I got to do over everything. And I found all these things that I had crossed off that I thought I didn't like, that it actually was, I just was too afraid to show up in it. But now I was like, what am I afraid of? Everything already broke. Everything broke. I can do whatever I want and there is no judgment. So if you are looking for somebody to support you, I am happy to help. My website is ericabennett.com. You can find me there. You can find me on social. We can set up some time and see if we are the right fit. But, being able to have somebody help you and navigate through that is crucial to being able to move through it faster, right? Nobody wants to stay stuck in the post-divorce nomad's land any longer than they have to, right? So I would be happy to help you in any way that I can.
Thank you. Thank you so much for just your honesty and sharing your story and all the wisdom that comes through it. And we'll make sure all those links are in the show notes. I'm very, very grateful. I fill a very unique role in these moms' lives. And for us, it's about getting through the toddler years and setting that foundation for long-term success. So to have somebody else that I know, that I trust, that I can say, oh, this is someone who can help you in this space of your life is just such a valuable resource. So thank you, Erica.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I know I laugh because who would have thunk it that sales and behavior training for 19 years is what helps me train kids, dogs, and the healing process. My girlfriends are always like, if you ever need to get a kid trained or a dog trained or to fix yourself, Eric is the place to go. So yes, it's a big job. Parenting is a big job. So hats off to all of you moms, one day at a time, one step at a time, and with the right support. So great. Thank you so much.
Exciting news. I wrote you a book. An ebook, and I recorded the audio version for you as well, because you are busy multitasking, mindful mamas. Grab your copy today of The Pandemic Mom's Guide to Preschool Readiness and anchor into the 5 executive functioning skills that your child needs to practice on the daily using you as a guide. It's so easy to do. I've built it so that it just naturally happens inside your day as you interact with your kids. And yes, each chapter is delivered to you 1 chapter a day to your email so that all you have to do is click and listen for a few minutes. It's easy, it's efficient, and it's effective. Let's raise some school and world ready kids. Just go to caratyrrell.com/ebook. That's Cara Tyrrell, TYRRELL.com/ebook and grab your copy of the Pandemic Mom's Preschool Readiness Guide today. Until our next episode, stay mindful and proactive as you transform the toddler years.